All right. Good morning, Doug. This is the day, this is March 16th when we're recording, but it's the day after the Ides of March. And you were mentioning something about that to me right before we started recording. What do you want to say about it?
Well, today is the day in 44 BC that Caesar was assassinated by Brutus, Cassius, and it said about 60 other senators in the Senate. And it just made me think about this. Was it a good thing or a bad thing that Caesar was taken out? Now, I'm a big fan of Brutus. He was very concerned about the direction that what was left of the Roman Republic was taking. And, Caesar was putting into effect all kinds of law. Caesar was a bit of a globalist, actually. He was looking to disperse power from Rome and give it more to people in the provinces. And this is hazy because all we know is what a few authors wrote, and everybody's got an axe to grind. But was it a good thing or a bad thing to kill Caesar? Uh, one thing that nobody brings up, or few people bring up, is the fact that this happened only 3 days before Caesar was about to march off to the east to Parthia to conquer the Persian Empire, which people talk about the Gauls and the northern barbarians, but what was always out there were the Persians. They were constantly having war with Persians, the Parthians, same thing, just different dynasties. Maybe what Brutus should have done is said, look, he's going out of town. This is going to be dangerous. I mean, Crassus, member of earlier triumvirate with Caesar, tried to take on the Persians, and they poured a goblet of gold down his throat.
Oh, that was that guy.
That's right. So it's not like this would have been risk-free for Caesar to attack the Parthians. So I think Brutus should have let it go under the circumstances, because Caesar's getting out of town. Maybe he wouldn't have come back.
Hmm.
But anyway, he set off a whole bunch of civil wars and so forth. So assassinations are dangerous of these high-ranking officials almost anywhere, quite frankly.
Right. Because it wasn't like the Republic was restored by getting rid of the bad guy or the perceived bad guy at the time.
No, you got rid of Caesar, and then Anthony and Augustus, who was Caesar's heir, basically reached
A truce of some kind.
yes, until it just got out of control. And then Augustus took on Anthony and Cleopatra at that point. And then this was wars. These were terrible wars. I mean, people being slain and all kinds of inconveniences until finally Augustus won. Was that 34 BC, something like that? And he didn't call himself a dictator, but he was. He called himself the first citizen, which kind of was nicer sounding.
Yeah, it's
So,
got kind of Animal Farm vibes, though.
yeah, as much as I despise politicians, it was probably a mistake killing Caesar, and most assassinations work out to make things worse, at least in the short run. So,
Mhm.
why?
You remember that series on HBO called Rome?
That was a great series. I'd love to watch it again just because it was so well done.
I was wondering how historically accurate it is.
Well, it was compressed. It, it was compressed, and there were some liberties taken, but it was well done because John Milius wrote that. And Milius, among other things, wrote the script for Apocalypse Now and
Oh,
several other things. He's a pretty ideologically sound guy. Milius. I
Yeah,
talked
I
to him.
love that series. I thought it was great.
It was great. I talked to Milius on the phone once for 10 minutes. I forget why we were talking.
Oh, wow.
Oh, this was years ago. But anyway,
That's awesome. Yeah, if people haven't if you want the if you don't want before you invest lots of time in reading about the history of Rome, this is what I started with. I watched that series before I'd read even anything, but I read a fair amount now, but it gave you kind of an orientation of at least this limited period of time, so that then when I'm reading the history, the characters came to life a little more because I could, you know, I could put faces on them.
yeah, completely agree. It was as well done as you can put the history of Rome over a couple of decades into a few hours. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was a big fan.
Well, good. And so the Ides of March, that whole that theme, that comes from Shakespeare, right? He's the person who made a big deal out of the Ides of March.
Yes. Yeah, the Ides of March, that was the Romans divided the month into several sections, and the Ides generally fell in the middle of the month. All months had their Ides.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know that. So then, but the idea that it's a foreboding time that does come from Shakespeare somehow, though. The idea
You
that
know,
you have,
and for what it's worth, you know, I'm not a Shakespeare scholar, but I do have some plays that are favorites. And I've got to tell you, Julius Caesar is my favorite play. It's really very readable, and it's full of good good concepts and good lines.
hmm,
Oh, I'd like to actually, reminds me I really should just take a couple hours out and read it again because it's really readable
hmm,
and pretty accurate. I mean,
okay. Well, what you're in Buenos Aires. You spent the last week or so in Argentina. I'm curious if you have any take on any observation. But now we're 4 months after Millet. What's the
yeah,
view?
costs have gone up a lot here. From being the one of the cheapest countries in the world, if not the cheapest, Argentina's kind of reasonably priced now. It's not giveaway cheap anymore. And the real estate market is still frozen, still locked up because nobody wants to spend big money when they don't really know what's going to happen. Is Milei going to succeed? Is he going to be, so real estate prices aren't moving, but the prices of what you pay in a restaurant are moving. Taxi prices, well, still very cheap. I mean, you can go almost any place you'd reasonably want to go around Buenos Aires for, uh, used to be so cheap in the past. Probably $3 will get you to Palermo now from Recoleta. And I don't see any reason to go anyplace but, well, first of all, if you live in BA, I think you ought to live in Recoleta, which is where I live. And if you go to a good restaurant, all the good restaurants are in Palermo, which is about a $3 cab ride away, 15 minutes or so, more or less. And the nouveau riche all live in Puerto Madero, where there are a whole bunch of other good restaurants. And other than that, you know, it's a giant city, but do you really need to go anywhere else?
No, I
Maybe.
mean, if you live in the right place in a city, the benefit of it is that you don't have to go anywhere else.
That's exactly right. Well, I guess we're all going to find those benefits in the future with 15-minute cities where, like it or not, we're not going more than 15 minutes away, at least not more
Exactly.
than twice a month.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. What about people's attitude about what's happening there? People to people, is the stress going up because of these costs going up? I mean, do people still? I saw some poll that actually, I think it was Steve Hanke, who is this advocate for dollarization. This economist said, that Malay's losing support as poll numbers have gone down because he didn't push forward with dollarization right away. I mean, are you seeing anything like that in people's attitudes?
Uh, Men in the street. What do they think about this? Um, no, I think that, well, look, one thing that's for sure, I think is for sure, it's this. It's that they're not going to be able to go back to what it was before. Even if something bad happens to Millet, and I hope nothing does, because he's sincere and he's doing the right thing as fast as he can. And I don't know what constraints he's actually confronting there in the Casa Rosada, but it's not going back to the way it was. It's going to be better, even if he's out of office. And he's working apace to abolish not just a few dozen, hundreds of worthless agencies. An Argentine film agency where people get on the gravy train and they give them money to make, and an art agency where they toss money. When the government's bankrupt and everything, you can't do that the government shouldn't do it anywhere under any circumstances. But he's acting to get rid of these things. And of course, everybody's fighting that tooth and nail. The individuals that are having their agencies abolished, hundreds of them, they're all fighting against. They don't want their doggy dishes broken.
Right. Their entire livelihood's built around it. I mean, it's probably millions of people that have these government jobs at this stage, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And he gets on the radio and he's very eloquent and talks to the people, fireside chats. It worked for Roosevelt. That's helping a lot. And basically he says, in addition to the moral and economic reasons why government should not do any of this, mostly moral reasons, he says, there's no money.
Right.
So there's no money. What do you expect? How are you going to pay for something when you don't have the money? But,
right.
But for better or worse, for the first time in modern Argentine history, the government is running a current surplus. But they have plenty of debts to pay off, but they're running a surplus. So I think it's working. I think it's going to go through, and barring something terrible happening, I think a year from now we're going to find property prices moving up a lot here in BA.
But the era of super cheap living in Argentina is probably gone at this stage. Would you agree?
Maybe it'll just be a normal country. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But, if he succeeds getting rid of, let's say, a 22% value added tax, which is insane, and getting rid of so many more taxes. There was a study done some years ago about what was the most regulated country in the Western Hemisphere. Argentina only came in second. Brazil came in first. It was worse. And also, I did my own personal study in terms of currency inflation. Brazil was also worse than that, too. I love that movie, Brazil, incidentally.
Good one.
Recall.
Yeah, it's a good one. Who's the guy who did that one? I can't remember his name.
Robert De Niro stars in it, among other people, I think.
Yeah. I used to know the name of the director. I can't recall anymore. But yeah, that was a very interesting movie.
It was. It was suitably surreal and bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah. There was another thing on your list after Ides of March. I just don't remember what it was that you wanted.
Oh, let me see. There was. Well, the Wall Street Journal had an article yesterday, and they were interviewing Gen Zers. Now, of course, young reporters, they don't know anything anyway. So this reporter was interviewing Gen Zers and coming up with, why are they unhappy? That was the article. Gen Zers are unhappy. Why are they unhappy? And so this woman comes up with 4 reasons, basically. 1, they're all pissed off because COVID caused them to have a delayed launch. It basically killed 2 years of their life where they had to sit around the house. They couldn't, they, they couldn't do anything. I mean, basically, they were like under house arrest, more or less, for a couple of years, and justifiably pissed off. And they should be blaming the government for the stupidity, but will they? Well, I don't know. They'll probably just blame COVID. But and she didn't get into that. She wasn't a very thoughtful reporter. But okay, Gen Z's got that to work against them. Second thing is they're all whining about the fact that housing is expensive. Rents are high, and that's correct. And buying a house is just like Neverland for these people, which leads to the third thing, which is their student loans. They were put in abeyance for a while, but now they got to pay them again. I mean, it's not like they get to skate on. Some of Biden managed to
Somehow. Yeah.
somehow, I don't know how, shouldn't have. But, it's an albatross around these kids' necks. And will that teach, a worthless degree, pay a lot of money? That doesn't go away. So, anyway, that's a good thing to whine about. And the last thing is TikTok, which is currently in the news. This reporter girl mentioned, they all want to be influencers. And, look, I know when you're a kid, you want to be a star, a pro athlete or something wonderful. But now everybody can see that you can be an influencer. If you got a computer, you can put shit on it and influence people. So they all want to do that, and TikTok's important to them.
Yeah, well, in a nation, I mean, if everyone's aspiration is to be an influencer, there's nobody left to influence, you know?
Right. And anyway, what is influencing all about? It's not about creating anything or dispensing knowledge. It's about giving opinions, which when we're talking about young people are essentially worthless opinions. Thank you very much for the opinion, but it's worth nothing.
Yeah, there's a lot of the good thing I think about TikTok and not it's kind of the opinions. It's people basically you get people reporting boots on the ground experience with stuff. So I've seen there's a whole bunch of these videos circulating that were originally on TikTok and they get moved to other platforms of these Gen Z people entering their career and going, this is how much I make, this is how much my rent is, this is how much I pay for this, and like, how's this supposed to work? And so you get real facts on how they, at least, it's one case, obviously, in each one, but you really get to see what they're experiencing. You get to see how absurd the rents are, and they really are. I mean, they really are unbelievable. And there's this big trend where a lot of them are turning against the legitimacy of government. I mean, really, you do see this where they're like, why, specifically around taxes, why are we giving these people any money? And that movement is growing among Gen Z. It really is.
Yeah, when they get their payroll stub, they probably feel pretty much the way I did, except they feel it much more because Social Security taxes, which is FICA. That was FICA. I was asking myself when I was starting to work.
Yeah,
and it's
who's
much-
that?
oh,
Why do they get so much more money?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, if they have medical, that's very expensive today. So yeah, I think it must be very hard for a young person to get ahead, get out from the back of the 8 ball.
I agree. I think it's really difficult. And I think part of this, the reason why they want to ban TikTok, the argument is this is big in the news now, and anytime you see both parties come together on a resolution very quickly to do something, you should be suspicious. And Republicans and Democrats in the House closed ranks and agreed that TikTok should be banned. So that's suspicious on its face. But I think the reason is that there are arguments that it actually gives the president executive authority essentially to censor things, not just TikTok. It can easily expand beyond that because they can essentially, there's a real loose definition of what foreign controlled or foreign influence status is. and they can make that case with anybody who receives advertising dollars from a foreign entity or a foreign nation, for instance. So anyway, so there's the argument a lot of people make is against that. I think the bigger reason why they probably want to shut it down is because it is actually not censored and it is not managed by the CCP to influence young minds. There actually are ideas that are um, verboten that show up there, including stop paying taxes, including things like, the Israeli Gaza thing. It was really strongly weighted toward Gaza. That's changed a little bit over time. But my daughter loves TikTok, so I get to see what she sees on it and talk about it regularly with her. And I asked her, I'm like, "Have you ever seen anything that's pro China?" She's like, "No, there's no China stuff on there. It's not even mentioned." And so they say it's like China influencing. Well, it's not like trying to get them to turn against, to adopt Chinese ways or anything like that.
Yes, and I've been on TikTok a number of times, not too many, but whenever I'm on it, it's very addictive. One thing after another. It's actually quite interesting and quite entertaining. But the big problem is that these people in government like to control things. And if it's TikTok, then it can be everything. The door is open. The First Amendment is a dead duck at this point. Let's admit it. And so is the Second Amendment. In fact, all of the Bill of Rights is basically a dead letter. They've been interpreted out of existence. So exigencies and emergencies.
Exactly. This falls under the national security provision, right? Gives the executive to deem anything a national security threat. And we've already know that you can be drone bombed if you're deemed a national security threat of some kind. So now this is but the information sphere is where the real battle is now. And they got to make sure that they have control over it.
Yeah, national security, of course, has absolutely nothing to do with national security. It has to do with security for the people that are within the Washington Beltway. And hopefully, gradually, Americans will realize that their enemy is not the government in Moscow or the government in Beijing. They're irrelevant to us and basically harmless to us. It's the government in Washington that is the clear and present danger to everything you have and believe in. And
right. And the tactic is to make you think that Moscow's the problem or your neighbor's the problem, but just something other than them, right? They just divide and focus elsewhere.
that's right. The talking head, the politician, he's the good guy trying to solve things, when actually he's the third party that's making things much worse for everybody.
So
Maybe we're going to have a revolution in this country. But, gee, that'll be so unpleasant. But talk about unpleasant things. When you were asking about what have I picked up off the ground here in Buenos Aires for the last few days, well, basically, well, I've got a glass of water here. One of the things that I've done is, I've mentioned this before, I'm a member of a group here of men, 24, it's a 100-year-old group made up of 8 Brits, 8 Argentines, and 8 Americans. And we get together every month, and one of us presents a paper on something that he knows about or is interested in or whatever. Actually, this last Thursday was my turn to present a paper. And this time, I presented a paper on something that I don't think most people think about, but is critically important. And that is the forever war between, and when I talk about the forever war, I'm not talking about the U.S. wars, which are forever wars, of course, but the real forever war is between Islam and the West. It's been going on since the early 600s when the Mohammedans poured out of Saudi Arabia over the next 150 years. They conquered most of the world up to India. And actually, at this point, I think it's game over. I presented a paper for 30 minutes explaining why it's in Europe, it's game over. The Mohammedans, and incidentally, I think it's quite correct, although it's now politically incorrect, to call them Mohammedans, just as you call Buddhists followers of Buddha, Christians followers of Christ. But they don't like that. They like you to call them Islamic. And why is that? Well, Islam means submission. Using their word to describe themselves is itself a form of submission. Anyway, getting back to this. In Europe, in 2013, the Pew Research Group investigated this, what's happening with the Islamization of Europe. And they determined that by 2050, Sweden was going to be 30%, then Britain, France, 20%, most of the rest of the Europe, 15 to 18%. Well, they grossly underestimated that. These numbers are moving up to those levels right now. And the Mohammedans are becoming very bold. Now, as to why this is and why Islam is a very different religion from others, and I'll publish a paper in International Man where people can read about why I'm saying this. It's not because I'm Islamophobic, which is another term, which if you don't like the religion of and it's much more than a religion, it's a whole world deal. It covers everything, politics, views on science, everything. It's not just a religion where you go to mosque and, here's some stories and are told to be good. That's not what it's all about at all. Yes, I guess I'm Islamophobic. I don't like Islam. It's destructive. It's anti-human. I consider it actually evil. But you're not supposed to be Islamophobic anymore. It's like being homophobic. Same thing. And this is also part of the PSYOP war, where Islamophobic. And it's perverse because I know lots of Muslims and they're very nice people as individuals. But that's as individuals. They've got a screw loose when it comes to this stuff. I could tell you examples of this. But when they get together as part of the Ummah, you're a kafir. And it's not good being a kafir.
Do you know that there's like this internal struggle within Islam too right now, where there's a woke seed in it as well? They're fighting against their own version of wokeism internally. Where I could share some examples of it with you, but basically, these highly educated people who've gone to Harvard and been brought up in this Marxist oppression type thing where they believe the white colonizers are the problem. Like that mindset has infected Islam too. I'm not saying it's the dominant, but there's an internal struggle against it right now.
So the people that you're talking about are still sincere believers in the Quran, but
they claim they are, but they have this, they certainly act, they say that they are, obviously they have to profess that they are, but they have this view of, you can't be racist in Islam, for instance. I mean, you're not supposed to judge someone by the race.
Oh.
But they do believe that the white colonists are the problem, which is inherent conflict.
Yeah, it is. And in the past, Islam really wasn't racist. So this is a bit of a change. Everybody hates white people these days, I guess.
Yeah, it's popular. Yeah. But the woke mind virus has even infiltrated Islam. That's how, and I think in your paper, you say that's the only competing worldview really to Islam today is focused.
Yes, because in the past, this is kind of interesting. Why do I feel that Islam is going to win the forever war, which has been going on since the 600s? Because it's things have flown back and forth. We turned away the Muslims at Lepanto in Vienna in 1683, and and then the West reached out and conquered all of the Islamic countries in the world. They were all colonized by the West. But there's something that's changed here in recent years. It's that Islam was a viable force militarily in pre-industrial times, pre-scientific times, where you're using swords and spears and primitive firearms, this type of thing. Well, that was one thing. But now that we've got talking about advanced science, Islam does not have that and never will have it for all kinds of reasons. So this is what terrorism is all about. Now that Islam is, since the end of World War II, is in the resurgence again, they're winning because in the past, Christendom, as it was called, was very strident and believed in itself and onward Christian soldiers, and Christians and Christendom took itself seriously, the way the Muslims take themselves seriously today. But we don't anymore. And this is an ideological war as much as a demographic war, where all through Europe, but now Christianity is actually dying and mostly dead in Europe. And it's actually dying in the US besides. There's no moral force to stand against Islam. And as Napoleon pointed out, in war, and this is a war, the psychological is to the physical as 3 is to 1. The Muslims are winning the demographic war, because white Europeans are not reproducing, but the Muslims reproduce 3 or 4 to 1 when they're there. Plus, there's huge immigration. So they're winning the demographic war. They're winning the ideological war because they actually believe in things, and Westerners don't believe in themselves or anything anymore. And so I'm not so worried about a kinetic war with a Muslim army, although there are some Muslim countries that have significant armies. But this war on terror and the fact that we're just going to roll over, the fact that people like Andrew Tate and Mike Tyson and lots of others are converting to Islam. It's all over for Europe. The war is pretty much lost. And you had a clip, didn't you?
Yeah, I shared a video with you. Maybe I can find it and share it. But it's essentially an imam doing a call to prayer in the British Parliament.
That is shocking. That is shocking. It's like the British are acknowledging that they're what the Muslims call dhimmis, conquered people of secondary status, that you have them perform a religious ceremony in the Parliament. And then you showed me one that a young Muslim has a German passport. And of course, he's crowing about the fact these Germans are idiots. They're fools. That is correct, of course.
And he's, I've conquered you. I've conquered you.
Yeah.
And you can't make me go away. We've taken over your territory. We've conquered you.
Yeah, I get free food and free money, and I watch your women and all this stuff. It's the whole package.
It's amazing. It really is. Really is. So just one more thing I think we're talking about today, Doug, is that there was a shooting in the subway in New York, and it has echoes of the was it last name Penny, the ex-Marine who
Oh, yeah.
intervened, yeah, and killed a guy, and he was arrested, but the guy was a problem on the subway, so it was like self-defense, basically, where he intervened, killed the guy, choked him out, accidentally killed him, and then anyway, he's arrested and gonna be tried now. So it had kinda echoes of self-defense in it, but there were politically correct people involved. Specifically, it was a immigrant couple, a migrant couple, I think from Venezuela, although I'm not certain of that, and a black guy, American New Yorker. The New Yorker, understandably upset, I think, that all the migrants that are there, all the services they receive, and some of the disorder that's caused by some of the migrants specifically, loses his shit on him and just starts attacking the guy, the migrant. He attacks him. His girlfriend comes to his aid, stabs the New Yorker in the back. The New Yorker then, he's much bigger, twice as big at least as the migrant, but some people separate him. That New Yorker goes and pulls out of his jacket pocket a pistol and looks like intent to shoot them. At least he's pointing at them anyway. At that point, the camera goes away, so you don't know for sure what happened. But allegedly, what happens is the migrant grabs for the gun. There's a struggle, and the New Yorker is shot, and he's in critical condition now. The migrant was, they're not going to file charges against him because it was self-defense, but and you know, with the New Yorker, he said along the way, he said, "You guys are beating up cops." Like one of his things he was complaining on video about the migrants is that you guys beat up cops. And anyway, we talked about this. This is where we would see the fray in society first between migrants and some of the urban folks, and this is what we're seeing now.
Yep, that's exactly right. And as there are more migrants, I think the black people are going to be the ones that are most pissed off because they're on the front lines dealing with these new people. And it is interesting that this black New Yorker brought up the fact that the migrants were beating up cops and he's carrying heat simultaneously. This is like a bunch of mixed signals I'm getting here.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows that when you see things that are just obviously unfair, obviously wrong in the justice system, like a lot of people look at January 6th that way, or maybe they'll look at the persecutions or the attacks, the lawfare against Trump as that way, or maybe they see Ruby Ridge or something like that in that way. For this New Yorker, it was those Venezuelans that beat up the cops and were let out of prison and then are on film going like this to the reporters. So he sees that and he goes, the injustice is clearly there, and he feels righteous in doing something about it.
Well, we have very serious problems with the wave of migrants that are being invited to the U.S. and subsidized by the U.S. But our problems are nothing compared to what the Europeans are going to be confronting in the years to come. And I have no sympathy for the Europeans. I really don't.
Hmm.
They voted socialist. This is what they believe is right. So screw them. To hell with them. I feel bad about that because Europe is the center of Western civilization. And as we've talked about in the past, Western civilization itself is being flushed. But, well, things change over time.
They do. But I'll be looking for more flashpoints like this. I imagine we're going to see more of them in New York in particular.
For lots of reasons, probably starting this summer. Economic and financial things, in addition, will add to it.
Yeah, and once you get into protest season, right? I mean, no one likes to protest in the snow.
Yep. Like the Rolling Stones sang years ago, under different circumstances. In Street Fighting Man, summertime's here, time has come for fighting in the streets.
That's something to look forward to. All right.
As it were.
It will be interesting. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today, Doug. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And we're back next week.
Great. Thanks, Matt.